In this episode of Deconstructing Comics, Ms. Marvel, Kumar and I discuss the first 4 trade paperbacks of Marvel's first Muslim superhero. Is the book's commentary about living as a Muslim too veiled? Is that out of necessity? First, I'd like to thank our patrons for keeping this show going. Join them at patreon.com/deconcomics. We're just $6 short of our next goal, which will unlock 15 more vintage episodes. If Patreon isn't in your budget, you can also send a one-time donation of any amount via PayPal to donate@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim.
This is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne, Australia. Let's see, it hasn't been that long. We always talk about, how long has it been since the last time?
It's been a long time, and then it actually wasn't. It was just like a month
ago. Yeah. And so this time we're kind of going a different direction from usual because it's something relatively recent and mainstream. Ms. Marvel, the new version written by G. Willow Wilson, drawn usually by Adrian Alfona, but sometimes they're fill-in artists. Now, I couldn't believe this has actually been coming out for 4 years already.
I was surprised by that too, because I thought, this is the thing that came out last year, but it's 2014.
So we decided to go with just the first 4 volumes, which are sort of the first series or the first season, however you want to think of it. Because at that point, then, because of the Secret Wars event, a lot of the series were started over from number 1, including this one. So that seemed like kind of a good place to limit it so that our reading wasn't so voluminous.
And yet it's not a good place to stop, which I think we'll talk about.
Well, yeah, that's kind of true. But we didn't want to have I'm not sure what volume they're up to now, like 8 or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
So it would have been a lot. Of course, we read more than that for Transmetropolitans.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so that's what we read. We read the first volume, the first series, the first 4 trades.
19 issues.
Yeah. And of course, the trades also have some additional stuff from other series where Kamala appeared. And the second time through, I just kind of punted those. Like, this doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
It just shows her with other heroes, but
it kind of almost gets in the way, but I think we'll get around to that stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
But you said you've been reading this and you've read beyond Volume 4, is that right?
I had actually, when we decided to do this, I had read the first 2 volumes.
Okay.
It was one of those, like, I've been meaning to read it, but I had kind of finally gotten started, but I wasn't very far along. So when we decided to do it, I read 3 and 4, and then I went back and read all 4. But no, I have not read beyond this point yet. Okay. So when I was looking up like interviews with Wilson to prepare, there were like spoilers in there. Like, no.
Right. But what? How did you choose it? Why did you suggest it?
Well, I mean, it's gotten a lot of attention, and having read the first 2, I thought it was worth talking about. And of course, it's gotten a lot of mainstream press attention because the main character is a Muslim, and the first Marvel superhero who is a Muslim to get his or her own book. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting, and then plus. I think I have to say, I feel like the writing on this is above average for a mainstream superhero book. Because, again and again, I was finding, something that I don't usually find in superhero comics, which is, kind of something that works on two levels, where, she was taking things that are kind of, superhero comics tropes are kind of, standard issue for a superhero comic, and using them to comment on other things, whether it be just kind of growing up or about like things about how Muslims are seen in, by more conservative-minded people, shall we say? I don't know. It's easier kind of when we get into the examples here, but first of all, for people who haven't seen any of the press, I mean, I think most people are probably aware of this even if they haven't read it at all. But basically, how this starts out was, so back in 2014, Marvel had this, I don't know, kind of event involving the Inhumans called Infinity. I had to look that up because I didn't read it. And it involved, the Inhumans. It's like sometime before this, they had established that, I don't quite understand it myself, but like people who have this sort of latent inhuman traits in them, if they're exposed to these Terrigen mists, then their powers will manifest. And so in Infinity, there was a Terrigen bomb that was detonated in the Earth's atmosphere, and then this fog came in, and people were exposed to it, and some of them got powers.
I need to stop you right there, because I read this 19 issues full through, plus the 3 bonus issues that are in there, and I flipped through them again, and the whole time I was like, where did this goddamn mist come from? And it was so frustrating for me. I was like, why aren't they explaining this? Why doesn't someone tell me? Why does the writer or some character tell me what the hell where this mist came from? And it's never explained in 19 issues. I was like, are they waiting to issue 50 to get around to it? Yeah, that was super annoying. And I have a feeling, now that you've said that, I have a feeling there might be other stuff, because there's a thing in like volume 4 where somebody tries to activate powers in her brother. Right. And then everybody's like, not everybody, but someone's like, that's not the Terrigen mist. And I'm like, what is it? They never tell you what it is. They say it's not the Terrigen mist. They don't. How did this guy end up with this stuff? Where did it come from? What is it if it's not the mist? There was some super annoying crossover type stuff. And there was another whole thing where there seems to be a coup d'etat in the Inhumans' home base, which is out in the bay, underwater, sort of. And they never explain. Yeah, they never explain where did all the original, where did the people who were ousted go? I was like, why aren't they there defending themselves? And I'm like, why isn't any of this explained? And was it? Now I'm wondering. Yeah, now that you've said this, I'm wondering if that was explained in some other thing.
That may be. I mean, I'm a little bit. I guess Wilson was just, as comic writers tend to do, and in these days they usually don't put footnotes in like they used to years ago, but I suppose she's assuming, if you're reading it in issues in context of what else is coming out at the time, you would probably know where the Terrigen mist is coming from and whatever. But I mean, I don't read all that much Marvel anymore, and I kind of keep up with what's going on by listening to iFanboy podcast, and I read a few Marvels as they come out, although I tend to always be running behind on them. But I knew about the event. I knew where that came from in the story, even though I didn't actually read Infinity. But yeah, the part about those kind of terrorist Inhumans, what's his name? Lineage was their leader. I don't know how they were able to hang out in New Attilan.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what
and
I was
not
wondering.
be kicked out.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Didn't
Where
make
were all
sense
the
to
others?
me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause where is Medusa? Yeah, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if that was, but now that you said that there was some other thing which explained the Terrigen Mist, and that was so annoying to me. But anyway, I want to also backtrack to another thing. You were talking about how it was well written, and I think, or I get the impression, well, maybe because the better titles percolate to the top, so you kind of hear about things like Hawkeye and Vision and the better written titles. You hear about them a lot, and I don't really hear about the crap if it's out there. Because I'm so disconnected with it. And I heard about this quite a lot too, but I have to say it was quite, like, I heard that the Vision was really great, which was written by that guy that did Mr. Miracle.
Tom King, yeah.
Right, which you also reviewed on the show. And I was very lukewarm on Vision, which was supposed to be great, and super lukewarm on Mr. Miracle, which was also supposed to be really great. And I was kind of lukewarm on this too. I liked it a bit more the second time through it. But I think it's kind of in that it's in that level of being like competent. It's like decent. But I wasn't nearly as blown away as I think the press would have led us to believe I should have been, as with those other books, you know. But,
Okay.
And maybe, you know, also combining both of those things, who is Ms. Marvel and Captain Marvel? Because I have no idea who this person is. And I tried to go on Wikipedia before reading, and I was like, okay, we'll find out about Ms. Marvel or Captain Marvel. And it was such a mess. It was like reading about Hawkeye or something, where even the explanations are like, what? Who is this person? What are their powers? And I couldn't keep any of it straight.
Okay, well, so Carol Danvers was the original Ms. Marvel. I guess starting in the late 60s, early 70s. And then, you know, the original Captain Marvel died in that graphic novel in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And then they played it. There have been several Captain Marvels since then. But most recently, Carol Danvers herself became Captain Marvel.
Okay, so she went from Ms. to Captain.
Right.
And are they all the same powers and stuff?
Well, this Ms. Marvel does not have the same powers as Carol Danvers had or has, but it's more just kind of, you know, that name was available, and you know, I think from an editorial standpoint, it's like we'll plug a new character into this name that is already known, and so it'll be more noticed. Sure. As it's explained in the story, it's, you know, that Kamala has idolized all these superheroes, and her favorite is Carol Danvers. And so since Carol Danvers is now Captain Marvel, Kamala appropriated the name Ms. Marvel, and, you know, when her power first manifested, she actually took the form of Carol Danvers.
Right. Now, as a longtime Marvel reader, would you say that Captain Marvel / Ms. Marvel was an A-list character? Like, is this someone on the level of, say, well, even Iron Man wasn't A-list back in the day, but would you consider them someone on that level? As Iron Man or Hulk?
Well, yeah, how do you determine A-level? I mean, she's been in the Avengers a lot. I
mean, in context of the story, I was kind of, because I didn't know who this person was, I was like, well, why does Kamala worship her so much? Like, is she... I thought, if this is a Z-list character, it's kind of like your favorite actor being, I don't know, Rob Schneider or something. Like some no-name. And I thought, I kind of had a bit of trouble putting that together, and it seemed a bit... Like, now also that you mentioned that the name was available, it kind of reminds me of that, like, back in the 2000s, there was that really great X-Force series by Milligan and Allred, which was nothing like the X-Force that came before it. Everybody was really pissed off about how different it was, and they eventually changed it to Ecstatics. And I feel kind of like, I think you're right, they maybe had the Ms. Marvel name, and they slotted it in to character that's maybe not super interesting, at least as far as I know.
Well, I mean, she's, anyone who reads very much Marvel would, really know who she is.
Right.
She's been around for a long time.
Right.
And that article you sent me, I guess Carol Danvers is going to show up in the movies pretty soon, and then maybe Kamala in 2 or 3 more years.
Okay. Yeah.
So, pretty soon, probably, anybody who goes to movies is going to know who she is. But
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe, if not A-list, then pretty close to it.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah. Well, when we decided to do this, I had the impression that you had also been interested in trying it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I was also kind of wondering if, I mean, you share some things in your backstory with Kamala in that you have a kind of immigrant background.
Yes.
So did you identify with her at all, or did you have any qualms with how the immigrant experience was presented?
No, I'll tell you the thing. Actually, you've touched on the thing that I kind of responded to emotionally the most was strict parents. And whenever I see like super strict immigrant parents in a movie or a book or a comic or anywhere, I start getting really worked up and angry about it, like emotional. And my parents aren't actually that strict. I mean, I guess they maybe softened up over the years or something like that. But that was kind of the only aspect that I really connected with. And I think it's this is another situation like with the Wonder Woman episode of this podcast and Promethea, probably a couple of others, where we've really got 2 middle-aged dudes talking about this comic, which was written by women and probably intended for female readership, not solely, but so I kind of felt like, again, like I wasn't, despite that aspect of it, I kind of felt like I wasn't the target audience. I think it's really, I felt more than any kind of Muslim identity thing, it was really, well, what I got out of it reading it was that it was more about young people, and it really felt like a YA, like a young adult prose thing, because she's kind of a standard YA protagonist, she's like, super into video games, and her parents are really strict, it doesn't matter, what religion they are. It's kind of that same thing. And that I was kind of, one of the things that made me lukewarm to it was she's so golly gee whiz plucky. And I mean, that's the point of the character. That's what's supposed to make her appealing. But there's just so much zingy dialogue. Like, it was just relentless. Anytime any person under 20 was on the page, they couldn't say anything without it having a bit of punch to it. And that kind of started to get to me, and I was like, this is not for this 43-year-old man. I bet my son would love this, or, somebody who's 15 would be this is really great, because they all seem to love that YA stuff, no matter how repetitive it is. And I kind of felt, also, regarding the strict parents, I really felt like, how is it really any different to Aunt May? Because it's kind of that repetitive thing of, trying to keep a secret from Aunt May, because Aunt May will freak out if she finds out that you're a superhero, that kind of thing. So it's kind of more, I don't know, somehow that the whole quote-unquote Muslim identity of the book because everything is in very sparse dialogue, by which I mean, they don't go super deep into these subjects. It's supposed to be a light entertainment, I think. But I felt as a result, I felt it was really predictable. Like, when the boyfriend shows up and he's Mr. Perfect, the potential boyfriend, I'm like, oh, he's a bad guy.
Yeah, well, that was pretty clear, especially from the foreshadowing with Medusa at the beginning of that story.
Yeah, and it was not only that. I was like, oh, he's got powers and he's a bad guy, And, it turned out that way. And even when with her mom, I knew the mom knew. Maybe, I don't know if I'm too cynical or what's the problem? Am I too old for it? All that kind of stuff. It's a super sweet book. It's very wise at times. But that delivery was really, that's for young people, I felt.
Yeah, well, I did. It didn't bother me so much, but occasionally I did feel like, if a real teenager would probably not have quite such snappy comebacks so often. It felt a little bit too sort of written and thought out for.
Well, I think
kind of off-the-cuff comments.
She consumes a lot of media and movies and stuff. Like, I found it a bit suspect when she makes Bill and Ted references, because that's, Strange Things Are Afoot at Circle K. I felt like that's a bit too old for her age range. But then there were references in there that were like, oh, I don't know what she's talking about. And it kind of made me glad. Like, I was like, okay, this has its own identity in those sorts of moments. So I can understand her being kind of zippy and taking on a persona much like Spider-Man. But every other teenager was like that too. Everyone else had a kind of snappy wit to their dialogue. Nobody was really bumbling and didn't know what to say, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Coming up, veiled references. Are they too subtle? Do they have to be subtle under the circumstances? Is there a link between Kamala being Marvel's first Muslim hero and her being a teenager? How Wilson takes advantage of secret wars and the problems with organization of the trades, and more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
This is an imaginary podcast, which may never have happened.
The Shortbox Showcase.
But then again may have. About a father and daughter. I'm Professor Allen.
And I'm Emily.
Who came from Ohio and talked about comics.
Walking Dead.
Tintin.
Black Lightning.
White Tiger. It tells of their rise to glory, when the great guests were yet to be booked.
Let's put it this way, Shogun Warriors wasn't going to win any Eisners.
And the great feats of editing not yet performed.
This is Ultra 7, this is Ultraman Jack, and this Ultraman Taro, and this Ultraman Leo, and this
of how they spoke at length.
This continuity is really the brainchild of nitpicking nerds the world over.
But to be fair, the best kind of confession is the Force confession.
And reviewed in brief tales that explore creatively the bounds of a given character's history.
Red Sun is wonderful with a very strange ending.
Of brilliant creators before their fall from grace. This is the era where Miller is at the height of his creative and artistic powers, and the ability of strong writing to encapsulate and transcend its time.
Flash of Two Earths by Gardner Fox.
This is an imaginary podcast. Aren't they all? Shortbox Showcase is part of the Relatively Geeky family of podcasts. Check us out on the web at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search in iTunes for Relatively Geeky or Shortbox Showcase. And remember, we're not experts.
We're just family.
You mentioned Peter Parker and Aunt May, and yeah, it is on that level, very on brand for Marvel. Kind of, heroes with problems and, sort of growing up. She's a teenager growing up and dealing with teenager problems at the same time as she's dealing with superhero problems. And then I felt like on top of that, there was this, something that you didn't really have with the origin of Spider-Man, where, she had idolized superheroes and wanted to be one.
Right.
And then she gets the powers and finds that it's, not what she expected. And, there are some downsides that she hadn't anticipated. And it's kind of analogy for just growing up. Being an adult is not as good as maybe you wanted it to be either.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Or there's another sort of that kind of thing where we talked about the Inhuman sort of offshoot group, the kind of terrorist group, and Kamala has a line about a few people. What I put it in my notes. When in Volume 3, when she's fighting that girl Kaboom, she says, "It's always the same. There's always that one group of people who think they have special permission to terrorize anybody who disagrees with them, and then everybody else who looks like them suffers."
That's such a great line.
Yeah, I mean, the first, you think about them. Oh, okay, yeah, Muslims experience the same thing.
It's a really great veiled line. I kind of, and the way that what was that guy's name? Kamran or something? The almost boyfriend.
Yeah, Kamran.
So he kind of says a lot of stuff too, where he's kind of the terrorist mindset, like we are superior. Why should we kowtow to these other people that are these normal humans that are inferior to us? My gut thing was this is a teen-rated book, and I wanted to go super deep into that kind of stuff more. But like I said, that's the kind of stuff that you get. You get these tiny bits of wisdom that pop up sometimes, and then it's just there on the surface of this fun superhero book.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and it's not. It probably shouldn't go deeper than that. But I was like, I want to read someone write a comic where it does go really deep into that kind of stuff. And I kind of want to know what the book looks like after 2016, because as we said at the start, I thought it was from last year. But I am wondering what it looks like, post-Trump, because I thought there were so many things like, what if her parents were deported, or there was a threat of them being deported, or something like storylines like that, or what if she was, she has this conservative brother, and what if she was the conservative one that got the powers? Like, how would that change the shape of the book? Because I think it would have been much different from this kind of Spider-Man dynamic in some way. I felt like it was kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say missed opportunities, but there are opportunities out there for someone to go deeper with. Yeah,
I mean, I can imagine, the idea of like having her deal with like hate crimes against Muslims or something. Yeah. But I don't think the book will ever go there. But I am interested to see what they're doing with it now. But I read 3 different interviews with Wilson, and like from kind of 3 different viewpoints. There was one that was like on Medium.com that was done by a feminist group. There was one that was in the New Yorker. And then the other one was more like a traditional comics site called doyouevencomicbook.com. So they all kind of had different priorities in interviewing Wilson.
Interesting.
But in the feminist one, Feminist Frequency, Wilson said that when they were thinking about developing this idea, it took a whole year, I guess, to develop the whole thing. And she said the last thing they decided on was what powers she would have, and she felt like that was really fraught, was the word that she used, because of traditionally superhero, a lot of superheroes have kind of violent powers, and she was thinking, well, the associations between Islam and violence, you have to be really careful. And, she felt like she was kind of walking a line between, people who would associate Muslims with terrorism and maybe like the Muslim audience who wouldn't want her to go too far the other way either. So she settled on shape-shifting because, it was not too violent, but it was something active, and it was good for, visually.
Yeah, I want to say 3 things about that.
Okay.
One about the visuals. I did find early on it was sometimes hard to tell when she had, like, her fist was bigger, because I couldn't tell if it was a perspective of the artist in a couple of things. But then, I figured it out. But I didn't like that they used the word embiggen all the time, because that is a Simpsons word, and to go back to that gag 100 times was just weird.
Okay, I guess I never saw that episode of Simpsons. There are many episodes of Simpsons I've not seen. But.
Yes. I loved, the first time the shape-changing appeared, I loved it, because she turned into that other Ms. Marvel or Captain Marvel completely. Mm-hmm. Even her skin color. Now, for me, this was a genius move, because Todd McFarlane tried to do the similar thing in Spawn, where Spawn had been a black man but came back to life as a white man, and Todd McFarlane thought he was going to do all this kind of racial analysis with it. I don't know what he was smoking at the time. As far as I know, Spawn did not become a racial commentary or anything. But anyway, I thought, this is going to be really interesting, because now we're going to see how people react to her differently when she's different races. And unfortunately, that went away. And that was another thing where I really wished, you should have stuck with that and gone deep with it, and it would have been really cool. But it's the other interesting thing about the violence is, there's that one scene where she hits that girl really hard and is immediately horrified. Like, she's mortified that she's done this, and is in shock and is, like, worried about, how, is she okay, or, things like that. So that's very interesting that they chose a kind of non-violent power. I do love it. Does allow for some things, like one of the covers was where she's punching a bank robber behind her, is kind of a Plastic Man kind of tribute. So I did love some aspects of it like that, for sure. But sometimes it was hard to tell. Like, didn't it seem like at one point, didn't that alien doctor guy in Adelan say that her powers were, or even Medusa said that her powers were starting to limit, like she couldn't completely change anymore. So it was becoming less and less. But then later, she seems to be going all over the place.
Yeah, I don't quite remember what was explained there, but yeah, so she wasn't able to change her facial appearance anymore.
Yeah, they were saying that by healing, it was somehow limiting the shape changing. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. Superhero comics logic.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes she was like Mr. Fantastic and she just stretched, but sometimes, like in one scene, she turned herself into a sofa, like in a certain montage. So, I don't know. Her powers are what they are, I think.
Something else that, as I started, I didn't really notice it at first, but as it kind of sunk in, I started to take it as kind of a statement too, that how many times she talks about how Jersey City is her home and she has to protect it. It's her hometown. She really takes pride in that as her hometown, where, some people might say she doesn't belong there because she doesn't look a certain way.
Right.
But I thought that was definitely intentional.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I never thought about that. That's a really good point too. Yeah. But that's never really explicit either, is it? And she's of a generation that none of her friends are racist, and at the school they're not even really. Even that girl Zoe, who makes kind of offhand racist comments, is not malicious. She's just kind of ignorant.
Yeah. Well, although then in Volume 4 she comes back and apologizes.
Yes, that's right.
And
yeah.
it's been so long, I was kind of thinking, who is this again? Oh, it's that girl from the first volume. Okay.
Yeah. Because there's some. There was a line that Kamala says there too, where. So she sneaks out to go to this party, and she meets Zoe there, and then Zoe makes a kind of racist comment, and I can't remember what it was exactly. But then later there's a narration box or something where Kamala says, or she says to someone that Zoe felt free to make racist comments because I had snuck out on my parents, as if I myself were rebelling against my culture. And that was a really insightful comment as well early on. But there's no discrimination against her for being Muslim. So there's discrimination. She's worried about possible discrimination for being an Inhuman if other Inhumans become terrorists. And also the inventor, there's discrimination against kids, against teenagers, as being like a kind of waste. The current generation as being a do-nothing, no-good generation. And the inventor, one of the villain in Volume 1 and 2, is exploiting that. And he even makes a comment like, if we said these things about any other minority group, we would be labeled racists or bigots. But because it's kids, nobody cares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now that whole story, I realized that there was another statement in there too, because he's using these kind of hopeless kids to power his machines, and the kids, so Ms. Marvel tries to rescue them, and they're saying, "Oh no, we want to do this because our lives are worthless anyway, so we'll just give our energy to this." And I felt like this is analogous to young people being recruited by terrorist organizations and having their life force sucked out of them.
Wow, yeah, excellent point. Yeah, I kind of wish she'd been more explicit about these things. Because then I would have gotten them too. But yeah, you're totally right. That's interesting.
Yeah, well,
but why does
that's for a writer, how explicit do you want to be about those? You don't want to be too kind of on the nose, as they say, too unsubtle, and just kind of say this is the same as terrorism.
Yes, and the other thing about it is this is, as you said, the first Muslim superhero at Marvel, so she has to kind of pussyfoot around. Mm-hmm. She can't be explicit about these things. So yeah, I mean, I can't really. It's not fair for me to accuse her of not going deeper into or being more explicit about some of these issues. But
yeah. Although I mean, kind of the existence of the character is kind of a statement, and I think it primes you a little bit to look for other statements in the book. Yeah. But I think, I think there's a kind of maybe a fear that the existence of the character alone is a bit provocative and probably don't push any further buttons. Yeah.
Why does the inventor want her alive? So she meets the inventor in the subway and he says, "Haven't you ever wondered why I want you alive?" And that's never unpacked, is it?
Well, unless he was hoping to power his machines with her too.
Yeah, but he doesn't try to capture her on the spot or even later. I'm not sure. I don't know. As I said, I flipped through it a second time, or I skimmed through it quite quickly, and I could not find the explanation. I feel like it was a bit of a, I don't know, a missed plot point. I feel like some of the plots, so there's an interesting approach here, which is that she's kind of I don't know what to call her, a kind of domestic superhero or a very street-level superhero. Like, everything starts out very small, like her first heroic act is to save a drowning classmate. And then it's all kind of very small things, and she's working up to this inventor who's not like a big league super bad guy, super villain. But I felt like that kind of... Now, sometimes when the plots get bigger, I felt like Ms. Marvel was not big enough to be in them. There's some things that are just... They just seem dangling, like the inventor, why does he want her alive? And also, Loki shows up in Volume 3, and he's supposed to find out who...
Yeah, if there are still any kids who were working for the inventor who were sort of lurking in the school or something.
Right. So he goes to the school dance. He spikes the drink. A few kids drink from the drink, and he spikes it with a truth-selling serum or potion. Sorry, and some of the kids drink from it and they start telling the truth. Kamala gets into a fight with him, and then he decides to leave, and he's like, okay, they're not here. You know, the inventor doesn't have any more recruits here. How did he know? It's like he only heard 2 or 3 of the truth from 2 or 3 kids, and then he leaves, and it's like, what? It was kind of left dangling, and you know, there's another one where where they're escaping from Adelan after the coup d'état, and they jump into a garbage chute, and the garbage chute goes into the sea, and I'm like, wait a second, Inhumans dumped their garbage into the sea? And I felt like this is like, okay, we're trying to inject the street level character into these kind of bigger plot lines, and I felt like that was the problem, was there was a mismatch, so that these plots were not gelling together quite the way they should have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that kind of subconsciously that did surprise me that they ended up in the sea. I was expecting, you know, a Star Wars style, you know, garbage masher.
Yeah. Yeah, or something. I just can't believe that they would pollute the ocean. It was a bit weird. But also at the same, you know, speaking of that street level thing, you know, or her being just an ordinary kind of, almost a person with no powers, almost a teenager with no powers and no money, like no super gadgets. I was thinking about the introduction of Black Panther, and Black Panther showed up in Fantastic Four. I mean, it's a huge kind of opening and a massive character. And I'm like, if you want to sell Muslim characters, now I'm not saying, I'm asking a question. I want to know how you feel about it. Do you think if you want to convince people that Muslim heroes is a good idea, we should have Muslim superheroes? And I can't believe I even have to say that, like, or that it's a thing that even exists, is that there aren't any. Is it better to start with somebody who's like an ordinary teenager that doesn't really do a lot on a large scale, or is it better to start with a super badass like Black Panther that is an awesome character that you want to see them save the world, etc., etc.?
Wow, I had not thought about that, but yeah, cause when Black Panther was introduced, he was, you know, fully formed, pretty much.
Yeah.
He was the king of Wakanda, and he had all this technology and whatever. Where she's just a teenager and just kind of learning what she's capable of in many ways.
It's kind of like why I feel this is more like a teen book than a middle-aged superhero reader book. Mm-hmm. It was, kind of what I was getting at earlier.
Although, now, I haven't read Harry Potter either, but from what I've heard, you know, inevitably, as the character grows up, it has to become more adult. Now, of course, in Marvel,
right,
time moves at a snail's pace, so she'll be a teenager when we're old and gray.
Right.
But, I mean, there has been, you know, a certain amount of development, and she's got to become more confident and better at using her powers. But yeah, well,
yeah. So I mean,
I guess
30 issues down.
Your point is, what if Kamala Khan had entered as like a 25-year-old?
Yeah, an awesome badass with, that was like, I'm going to save the world in the first issue and beat up Hulk, and be super awesome.
Right, like, really awesome powers, or like Thor-level powers or something.
or some, what if we started in the future and we got this flashback, this stuff later, in some sense, if you know what I mean. Like, what if, I'm asking it from the perspective of, if you were Marvel and you were antsy about introducing a Muslim superhero, should we do this or not? Or we got to be careful breaking new ground. Are we going to do it like we did with Black Panther and just be this guy with awesome, huge muscles comes out and beats up the Fantastic Four, or are we going to have this thing which really is going to appeal to teenagers of any religion?
Well, I mean, they could have gone the Black Panther route. I think, her talking about how fraught it was to decide what powers Kamala had might have, kept her from going the Black Panther route.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess only history will tell. Like 10 years from now, if we have 10 more superheroes, like 10 more Muslim superheroes, maybe we'll know this was the right path to take.
Yeah, and maybe some of them won't have strict parents.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't have to deal with this Aunt May repetitiveness every time she shows up. I have to say I love the burkini. The idea of converting the burkini into a superhero outfit was genius. That was really smart. And that one was really culturally specific, too. So I really did love that.
I also felt like I should just mention, I thought that Wilson did a really good job. I'm not sure how Marvel is handling it these days exactly, but I know in the past, sometimes writers have complained like they were just getting going with their storyline, and then editorial says you have to work into this event, and you
Right.
have to maybe just pause your story that you were developing or throw it all away completely because the whole Marvel universe is going through this epic change and blah blah blah. But I thought at the end of this first season or whatever in Volume 4, they're heading into the Secret Wars event, and I thought Wilson really made good use of it to push the story forward rather than getting derailed.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this, because this is also has to do with the trade paperback organization, which I kind of alluded to at the beginning. So thank you for mentioning Secret Wars, because so this planet shows up over New York. And I'm like, okay, what's this planet going to be? So we get to the end of the storyline. We don't know what the hell is the planet. This is never explained.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this thing? Somebody tell me. And even now you said a Secret Wars, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's some crossover thing. I didn't know it was a crossover thing. But we get Captain Marvel, the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel shows up, and she doesn't say what it is. Maybe she doesn't know at that stage. I don't know. But I was like, can somebody tell me? This is another plot point, like the Mist.
Yeah, I think
where I was like, what is going on?
Marvel is not thinking to put something in to fill in the context that people might have known if they were buying it in issues. But yeah, you're right. The trade should kind of fill in those gaps, and it doesn't.
Well, the worst thing about it is, so she has a kind of heart-to-heart with her best friend who is in love with her, which, by the way, I saw from page 1. Oh, this guy, the best friend's in love with her. Like, I've seen this in 100 YA things. I know, that bit drove me nuts. And the predictability drove me nuts. But anyway, so they have this, touching heart-to-heart, and then you turn the page, and then you get 20 pages of Spider-Man story. I'm like, where's the planet? What happened? How is she hanging out with Spider-Man when this planet is looming overhead and the Earth is about to be destroyed? And it was baffling that Marvel decided to just jam that stuff in there.
Yeah, just a couple of Spider-Man issues where she appeared, but it had nothing to do with the story in her own book or Secret Wars.
Yeah. By the way, I couldn't even tell what was going on in the Spider-Man story, because it said Doc Ock had possessed Spidey and fell in love with some woman, and then the woman shows up and it's a little kid. I was like, what?
Right. Well, I had read it all before, so I knew. But yeah, dropping it into this, if you haven't been reading Spider-Man, it makes no sense at all.
There's a recap that said, Dr. Octopus fell in love with this woman, XYZ, and then you get reading the story, and XYZ is this little girl, like this 10-year-old. She's an adult, but she's not tall. Oh my god!
What in earlier generations might have been called a midget. I'm not sure what a more politically correct term is.
She's a dwarf. She's a dwarf. Okay. You can Humberto Ramos. I love that guy's unique art style, but you can never tell that was a dwarf. That was a child as far as me reading it. I couldn't tell what was going on. There's, at the end of Volume 3, we get a S.H.I.E.L.D. issue, and I could barely tell what was going on in that either. The storytelling. It actually made me appreciate the Ms. Marvel issues a lot, because I was like, this is very competent. This is good storytelling, really. And I couldn't tell what was going on in S.H.I.E.L.D., and the Spider-Man stuff was like... I was surprised too Dan Slott's still involved in Spider-Man. How long ago did we record that Spider-Man?
Wow, I can't even... I've completely lost track. I think he's about to get off of it finally. Okay. But, he's been doing Amazing Spider-Man for the better part of a decade at this point.
Yeah. But I was really annoyed with the way the trade paperbacks were organized. Would have been much better without that S.H.I.E.L.D. business and the Spider-Man business. They should have left it with, just collect the 4 issues of the big planet approaching storyline, and then please God, in Volume 5, page 1, let us know what's going on with that planet, because I did not know.
Just checking. In November 2010 is when Dan Slott took over as sole writer of Amazing Spider-Man.
Wow, okay. All
right. So it's been a long time. But I guess, but this is getting way off topic, but I guess that he's going to be writing the relaunch of Fantastic Four.
Okay.
And I'm not sure who's taking over Spider-Man. I haven't been paying attention to that, but
okay.
Even though I read the book, but...
Yeah. So I'll add, I loved when she goes to visit the priest. Is that what you call him?
Imam?
The Imam or Imran? I can't remember. But anyway, she goes to visit him, and you think, she's going to get a dressing down from this guy, but he encourages her. When she finds out, you're helping people, okay, well, do it in an honorable way. And I love that, her mother, too, when she reveals that she knows about it, she's smart about it. Like, the mother's smart about it. Like, I'm glad that if the worst thing you're doing is going out and helping people, that's the girl I've raised, And it reminded me, again, of that Aunt May issue that Straczynski wrote, where she finds out that he's Peter Spider-Man. It's like a really beautiful issue where she's like, okay, so, my nephew is Spider-Man, and she totally supports him.
And I so wish that they hadn't undone that, but...
well, I don't know anything about that, but I do remember they did undo that, right. But it was brilliant. It was really brilliant. Then she wrote those angry letters to the Daily Bugle, like, how can you write these terrible things about... It's like if your son or daughter came out as gay, and if you were bigoted before, and then suddenly you changed because when you found out. It was like that. It was really beautiful. So, again, there's that kind of parallel there with the mother. So I love that bit. I'm very interested to see what happens with the brother and his powers, because like I said earlier, like, he's the more conservative character. So are we going to have a completely different dynamic there? I think that would be really
I do want to keep reading and get caught up and find out what happens with various aspects.
And I love the two, for some reason, like, the 2 Wolverine issues were great. And I felt like Wilson was somehow very comfortable writing them. Like, they were there's a real easy flow, and the rapport between the 2 characters was magic in those 2 issues. And the zingers, and the lines coming out of there were really great and fun. And I felt like, somehow she's more comfortable writing the Wolverine stuff. It's like, it didn't feel like she was always trying so hard to make everything clever and witty. It was just almost really natural, very off-the-cuff kind of, like, interaction between those 2 characters that I thought was really great. And what else? I have no idea why she was so into Kamran. Like, that guy, she hung out with him once, and then she was, like, deeply in love with him.
It's compressed storytelling.
And then she was very heartbroken. Although there's a great scene with the hot dog seller where she's, like, pouring out her woes, and he has to cut her off from her doom dog.
I was like, I think wonderful. You've had enough. Should I call you a taxi?
Yeah, it was an awesome scene. I don't know, I did not buy for a second that she was so in love with that guy. just because he said he liked video games and they spent one night talking about stuff. And then he revealed he had powers. I thought she was a smarter girl than that, really. But I think what it's boiling down to is, I would also, if we were to talk about Harry Potter on this show, I would say, because I've only read the first one, really, and I've watched a bunch of movies, I would similarly say, wow, this is a really well-written book, and I loved all these scenes in it, and I was very lukewarm on it, because I'm not the target audience at all. So I think it's a really, my gut, my final thought on it is basically it's a really smart book, and I think young people would really connect with it, and kind of just wasn't for me, really, in the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it's YA-ish, but yeah, I mean, I didn't feel excluded from the target audience, even so. I mean, from having read a lot of Marvel comics, and I felt like this was one of the better ones.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. It's one of that wave, like I said before, like Hawkeye and Vision and all that stuff.
So just if you like to read good Marvel comics, this is one to read, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ms. Marvel is published by Marvel Comics. Tell us what you think. Write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or contact us through social media. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We're also on the Comics Podcast Network at comicspodcasts.com and on comicon.com, where our new episodes go up on Fridays, give or take a day. Also, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or wherever you find podcasts. Tell the world why you enjoy Deconstructing Comics. Our theme is from bensound.com. Once again, don't forget we just need $6 more in monthly pledges to reach our next Patreon goal and release 15 more vintage episodes. Help support the show with a pledge at patreon.com/deconcomics. Last Thursday on To the Bat Poles, we discussed the two-part Egghead and Olga story, The Og and I, and How to Hatch a Dinosaur. Check it out at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com or on all the usual podcast sites. Next month, we're back to weekly Deconstructing Comics, and Critiquing Comics moves back to every other Thursday as we move toward Deconstructing Comics episode 600. Next Monday, Emmett talks with Dylan Horrocks, looking back at his 1990s series Hicksville. How does he feel about it now, 20 years after he finished it? Listen for that next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.